In the village of Anwick, a somber silence hung over the ancient bridge, like a hidden warning to the few who dared to approach. It was a cold night, with the moon partially obscured by dense clouds. The trees surrounding the bridge seemed to whisper secrets to the wind, and the streetlights flickered like tired eyes that had witnessed things beyond human comprehension. Beneath the bridge, the river flowed slowly, but the sound of its waters was interrupted by an inexplicable echo, like a distant lament. Tom, Sarah, and Liam stood there together, armed with a trembling lantern and a mix of courage and fear. Each had their own reason for facing the darkness of that cursed bridge. Tom wanted to prove that the rumors were nonsense. Sarah sought inspiration for her next piece of art, believing that a little adrenaline would spark her creativity. And Liam, the most introspective of the trio, felt an almost instinctive need to confront his fears. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, breaking the silence, her gaze fixed on the darkness ahead, but only emptiness responded. The bridge had a presence, something that was felt even if it was invisible. On the asphalt, deep marks seemed to shift with the beam of the lantern, like shadows that defied the laws of the physical world. An old radio that Liam had brought, seemingly for no reason, began to crackle. However, the sound that emerged was not just static. Low voices surfaced, distorted words impossible to comprehend, but with a tone that seemed filled with sadness and something darker. As the friends advanced, the wind grew colder. Something in the atmosphere seemed to change. It was as if the world around the bridge had become heavier, each step requiring more effort. Local legends spoke of a truck driver who had lost his life there, trapped and unable to move on. But what awaited them that night was beyond anything they were prepared to face. Liam's radio suddenly emitted a sharp, unexpected noise, as if it had been turned off by invisible hands. An oppressive silence enveloped the area, heavier than any of the friends could bear. What had started as an investigative walk now felt like a plunge into an unfathomable abyss. Tom, always the bravest, tried to break the tense atmosphere with his usual bravado. "It's just the wind. There's nothing here, just stories to scare children." But his voice trembled, betraying his superficial courage. He swept the lantern across the bridge, revealing little beyond the emptiness. But for a brief moment, it seemed like the shadows at the edge of the path moved on their own. Sarah hugged her coat tight against her body, feeling a chill that was not natural. "This isn't just the wind, Tom. Something is wrong." Her eyes were fixed on the asphalt. There, a series of deep marks stood out, as if tires had torn pieces from the ground in a frenzy. Strangely, they formed a pattern that vaguely resembled spirals, or were their minds playing tricks? Suddenly, a heavy sound echoed across the bridge. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, as if something invisible was walking towards them. Sarah took a step back, colliding with Liam, who seemed frozen in place. "Did you see that?" Liam whispered, pointing towards the end of the bridge. An indistinct figure emerged from the mist, tall and motionless, watching them. The silhouette had a human shape, but its movements, or lack thereof, seemed wrong, as if it belonged to a horror film paused mid-scene. The smell of petrol began to permeate the air, strong enough to make Sarah cover her nose. The sound of an old engine echoed, but no vehicle was in sight. "This is impossible," Liam said, squinting at the source of the noise. Sarah's quiet voice blended with the growing sounds that seemed to emanate from the bridge itself. "I think the truck driver knows we're here." Liam's radio turned on by itself, playing a melancholic song from the 70s, interrupted by a desperate scream, almost human. They now understood something or someone was trying to communicate. The figure in the distance seemed to dissolve into the mist, but at the same time, its presence intensified. It was not merely visible, it was felt, An invisible pressure pressed against the chests of the three friends, as if the air around them had become dense and malevolent. "Let's go," Sarah said, tears in her eyes. Her hands trembled as she held the lantern, which now seemed like a useless toy against the encroaching darkness. Tom, usually the most skeptical, hesitated, but even he seemed to sense that they were no longer alone. Liam took a step forward, as if drawn by a force he could not comprehend. "We can't leave yet," he said. "There's something that wants to show us something." The words were disconnected, but they did not seem entirely his own. Then it happened. The sound of screeching tires echoed across the bridge, loud and clear, as if a truck was approaching at full speed. The friends instinctively turned, but all they saw was emptiness. No vehicle, no headlights, just the bridge, shrouded in fog. But the noise did not cease. It grew louder, closer, until the ground began to vibrate beneath their feet. Tom shouted something no one could quite understand as Sarah fell to her knees, covering her ears, trying to block out the deafening roar. When the sound finally stopped, an almost unnatural silence enveloped the place. Sarah pointed the lantern at the ground, where something was now visible. Blood. Not fresh, but dry, staining the asphalt in a grotesque pattern that resembled a spiral. "That wasn't here before," she said, her voice barely audible. Suddenly the lantern flickered, and they saw it. For a fraction of a second, the silhouette of the truck driver stood there, just meters away. It was not merely a shadow. He had form, contours, but the darkness seemed to consume him, preventing any detail from being perceived. The smell of petrol became unbearable, and then the voice, "Why did you come here?" It was hoarse, dragged out, as if spoken by lips that had not belonged to the living for a long time. The streetlights began to flicker, and the friends ran, but the bridge seemed endless. Each step led them back to the same place, as if the road had trapped them. The echo of their footsteps filled the bridge, but it felt like they were going nowhere. Sarah screamed in desperation, her legs wavering as Tom frantically looked around, searching for a way out. Liam, however, remained strangely calm. His eyes were fixed on the emptiness ahead, as if he could see something the others could not. Then the mist parted, a pale yellowish light illuminated the road, and the sound of an engine was heard again. This time, there was no denying it. A massive truck, gleaming like freshly polished steel, approached slowly. His headlights pierced the darkness, but what was behind the wheel sent chills down the spines of the three. The figure was tall, dressed in an oil-stained jumpsuit, but its face was a mask of emptiness. There were no eyes, no mouth, no human features, just a dim glow that pulsed like a dying ember. The truck driver didn't just drive a vehicle. He seemed to be an extension of the truck itself, as if machine and spirit were one entity. Tom picked up a stone from the ground and threw it with all his might at the truck, but before it could hit, it vanished into thin air. The engine roared in response, and the entity accelerated, the shrill sound of the tires making the atmosphere nearly unbearable. "Run!" Liam shouted, snapping out of his trance. They lunged to the side of the bridge, but even there was no safety. The truck stopped abruptly, and the figure of the truck driver stepped out of the cab. His footsteps echoed on the asphalt, each one heavier and more menacing than the last. Sarah fell to the ground, and before Tom could help her, the truck driver extended a long skeletal hand directly towards her. "You shouldn't have come," the deep voice echoed, laden with pain and anger. Sarah began to scream, but her voice was swallowed by the darkness around them. With a courage he didn't know he possessed, Liam yelled, "What do you want? Why are you chasing us?" The truck driver turned to him, and for a brief moment, his features became more human. "Liberation," he said, before his body exploded into black smoke that enveloped them. The smoke felt alive, pressing the three of them to the ground. Images began to appear in their minds. A destroyed life, a lonely man on a never-ending road, the despair of never finding peace. It was the truck driver's story, imprinted on their souls like a brand. Suddenly, Sarah managed to speak. "It's the bridge. It has trapped him here. He can't leave." The creature reacted to her words as if struck, hesitating for a moment. Taking advantage of the pause, Tom stood up and shouted, "What can we do? How do we break this?" The figure dissipated, but the truck remained, motionless, like a dark sentinel. On the asphalt, a message slowly appeared, written in dried blood. "Choose who stays." Terror engulfed them. It was clear that the bridge demanded a sacrifice to free the spirit trapped there. But who would be left behind? Time seemed to race against them, and every second intensified the pressure. "We're not leaving anyone behind," Tom shouted. But the bridge roared in response, as if the very structure were alive. Liam looked at his friends, tears streaming down his face. "I came here to face my fears. Maybe it's my turn to pay the price." Liam stepped forward, facing the immobile truck as if he could feel the eyes of the truck driver upon him. "If that's what it takes to end this, then I'll stay," he said, his voice firm, though fear was evident in his eyes. Sarah and Tom immediately protested. "No, Liam! This can't be right!" Sarah pleaded, gripping his arm tightly. Tom approached, visibly shaken, but trying to hold it together. "No one needs to be sacrificed. There has to be another way." He scanned the ground, the horizon, any sign of escape or solution, but the bridge seemed to have made its decision. The asphalt vibrated again, and the message on the ground glowed with intensity. "Choose, or everyone stays." The wind began to swirl around them, howling like a hungry beast. The figure of the truck driver emerged once more, this time clearer, more human, yet with a sadness so profound in his eyes that it seemed to draw in all the light around. "Someone must stay," he said, his voice reverberating. "Only then can I leave." Liam took a deep breath, resolute. "I accept." He looked at Sarah and Tom, tears now streaming down his face. "You need to get out of here. Tell the world what happened. Make sure this bridge isn't the tomb of anyone else." Sarah fell to her knees, sobbing. "No, Liam, we came together. We'll leave together." But before she could reach him, Liam walked towards the truck. The entity opened its arms, and with a slow gesture, signaled for Liam to enter the truck's interior. As he did, the truck began to glow, as if an ancient energy was being activated. Tom screamed in protest, trying to run after his friend, but the ground held him fast, as if the bridge itself would not allow it. "Liam, no!" Liam looked back, his eyes filled with fear, but also acceptance. "Live for me." And with those words, the truck accelerated, disappearing into the fog. The sound of the engine faded into total silence, leaving only Sarah and Tom on the bridge. When the mist cleared, the path was free. The smell of gasoline had vanished, and the bridge seemed just an ordinary bridge once more. But nothing would be the same for Sarah and Tom. They crossed over, feeling the weight of Liam's loss and the terror of knowing he was now part of that cursed place. Weeks later, Sarah returned to the bridge alone. She carried a candle and a small notebook where she had written everything they had experienced. In the center of the bridge, she lit the candle and left it there, a tribute to the friend who had sacrificed himself. When she turned to leave, something in the wind carried a familiar sound, Liam's radio, and for a moment, she thought she heard his voice. "I'm okay." She never knew if it was real or just her mind trying to find comfort. But as she looked back at the bridge one last time, something caught her attention. The marks on the asphalt had vanished, but now, etched in the concrete, was a single name: Liam. Months later, the Anwick Bridge seemed to have returned to its dormant state. For the villagers, the story of Liam, Sarah, and Tom became just another among many about the curse of that place. But, as with all legends, the details began to change, rendering what happened that night even more nebulous. A truck driver passing over the bridge on a foggy night reported something unusual. He said he had seen a man standing at the roadside, waving as if seeking a lift. As he slowed down, the truck driver saw Liam's face, or something that looked like him. However, when he tried to stop, the man vanished in a swirl of mist. The truck driver swore that, for a brief moment, the smell of gasoline filled the cab before it disappeared. Days later, a group of teenagers from the village, daring to challenge their fears like so many before them, decided to explore the bridge. They carried flashlights, cameras, and a forced bravery. Upon reaching the middle of the bridge, they found something that shouldn't have been there. An old radio, covered in dust, yet still functioning. The static filled the air, and amid the crackles, they heard a single word: leave. News spread quickly through the village. Some said that Liam was still trapped there, not as the original truck driver, but as part of the bridge, a protective spirit trying to prevent others from making the same mistake he did. Others believed that the curse simply continued, passing from one soul to another while the bridge kept its hold. Sarah, who never stopped feeling the guilt for Liam's sacrifice, began to visit the bridge regularly. On one of these visits, she found a new message etched into the asphalt, so subtle that she almost overlooked it. Look after each other. It was the phrase Liam used to say whenever they talked about friendship. However, it wasn't just the village of Anwick that felt the impact. Reports began to emerge from neighboring towns about roads connected to the bridge, where indistinct figures were seen on foggy nights, always accompanied by the same smell of petrol. Some claimed to hear the sound of a distant engine or see headlights flickering on the horizon before fading into the darkness. One night, while driving away from the village, Tom heard a familiar sound on his car radio. It was the song Liam loved, interrupted by a soft, unmistakable voice. "I'm still with you." Tom stopped the car and looked back, but all he saw was the empty road. And then he realized what happened at the Anwick Bridge didn't end that night. It was just the beginning of something much greater.